discussion regarding what sequencing is and how it can be and the major players. So the next thing is that we want to find out, like, why do we want to compare sequences, why, right? So one of the very basic questions about genes or proteins, it is that they're related or not. And what can relatedness basically give us regarding to proteins? It is that it can tell us whether they are homologous or not. If they are homologous, they can have similar functions. And by analyzing many DNA and protein sequences, it is possible to identify the domains or motifs that are shared among a group of molecules. And this analysis of relatedness of proteins and genes, it is basically accompanied by alignment. So as we complete the sequencing of genomes of many organisms, the task of finding out how proteins are related within an organism and between these organisms becomes increasingly fundamental to understand the very essence of life, a life, where it originated and where it is going and how it is changing. So basically in this section we will introduce the pairwise sequence alignment, and in a very evolutionary perspective. So as this gene is asking the other one, that is, are we basically related? So for that relation of the gene or the protein, we basically need to compare their sequences. So basically what information can we get out of comparing sequences? For comparing the sequences of the DNA, we can identify a sequence in a database search, we can search for polymorphisms, we can identify for cloned cDNA fragments, and comparing regulatory regions. Like most of the high throughput stuff that we do, it can be obtained from this basic fleet of comparing the DNA sequences. As well as if we're comparing protein, we can have an information about homology of the proteins, we can identify the codon degeneracy, and we can understand a variety of information regarding these sequences and proteins. So some basic terminology that we need to understand to understand homology is that homologous sequences can either be paralogs or orthologs. So initially, what are paralogs? So paralogs are basically homologous sequences that arose by a mechanism such as a gene duplication event at some part in the evolutionary history. So there was a gene duplication event that basically gave rise to all sort of different globin genes. And orthologs are basically homologous sequences in different species that arose from a common ancestral gene during speciation. So initially there was a duplication event that gave rise to different gene. For example, a globin gene initially there was, and then there was a duplication event to give alpha and a beta, and all of the different variations from further alpha gene and the beta gene, they are basically orthologs. So paralogs are from duplication events, and orthologs are basically from like homologous sequences that arose because of speciation. So basically, and now we are going to see a little bit of how to perform the pairwise alignment. And in summary, the pairwise alignment, it is the process of lining up two sequences to achieve maximum levels of identity. And the purpose of a pairwise alignment is to assess the degree of similarity and the possibility of homology between the two molecules. So for example, we may say the two proteins share 25% amino acid identity and 39% similarity. So okay, so this is a bit of information, but we can see that if the amount of sequence identity is sufficient, then the two sequences are probably homologous. They can be considered to be homologous. It is never correct to say that two proteins share a certain percent homology, because there are certain homologs, like either homologs, they are going to be either homologs or they're not. Similarly, it is not approachable to describe two sequences as highly homologous. Instead, it can be said that they share a certain degree of similarity. So by comparing the two sequences, we can get information about how identical they are or how similar they are. So we're going to be having a discussion about similarity and identity later. But pairwise sequence alignment, it involves comparing the sequences to get really good information about that. So over here what we basically have it is that again we can go to this NCBI and search for a particular protein. So this time I was searching for the protein of SOX2, and in this what basically I did, I went for the protein information of the SOX2 gene, which is a regulatory gene, and bunch of information pops up. Over here we had the first is a gene level information, but I wanted the protein sequences of that So I went to the protein sequence and I procured that information from that. So from here we can basically get the faster sequence of this gene, of this protein. But what we can also do it is that we can run the BLAST query for this. So what will happen if we run the BLAST query for this, if we want to see whether this sequence is just present in any other organism or just aligning these sequences. It is that for example we want to find out this um, gene in some other model organism, for example zebrafish, or like I did earlier, we want to compare the sequence in chimpanzees. So you can basically type on your target organism in which you can see the sequence similarity or differences. So over here I'm going to want to find out the sequence similarity or the alignment of this sequence with that of the zebrafish. So I just blasted the sequences, and it's going to take a bit of time in which it is aligning those sequences and giving us our desired output of the information that we have. So over here this is the basic result that we see, and all sort of hits that we have gotten, right? So the first hit that we see over here, it is got 100% query coverage and in e-value and a percentage identity. So we're going to be discussing about all of that in more detail. This is a graphical summary of our results. The alignments can be seen further, and we're going to be discussing about them as well. So this is the alignment tab, and then we can see the taxonomy of that organism from here as well. So moving on to the information that we basically had over here, first of all is we have to have information regarding the identity. So what is basically identity? Okay, over here what we basically need to consider it is that two of these, this is a query sequence and this is the subject, and the percentage identity, it is how many amino acids they are basically the same within these sequences. So they're basically going to take all of the sequence, compare them, and they're going to count the number of sequences that are conserved. So that is going to be the percentage identity, or as I've written here, identity, it is the extent to which two amino acids sequences are invariant, meaning that how much they are the same in both of these, the query as well as the subject. The next thing that we want to consider it is conservative substitution. So over here what we see it is that with some data we are going to see the positive sign, right? So what this positive sign says is explained by the concept of codon degeneracy. It is that sometimes the information, sometimes an amino acid may change with another amino acid that has the same properties that it imparts upon the protein. So over here that substitution or a conservative substitution, it is represented by a positive sign. So where we see a change and represented by a positive sign, it is that there has been a substitution, but it is a conservative substitution, meaning that there has been no change in the protein structure. And then we have some gaps. So for example we see a gap over here. So these are the sequences that have been subjected to mutation, that have been subjected to losses. So they are kept with the help of this dotted line, and this basically is done in order to keep the sequence alignment very like word to word, end to end. And this shows that there has been a mutational event that occurred over here. So this sequence, it is not what it is present in the query, and the subject has a different sequence of that. So this is basically how we can look at the sequence level information from that. So next concept is about the scoring matrices. So substitution matrices for amino acid, they basically provide the likelihood of character substitution, and the aim, it is basically to model evolutionary sequence change over evolutionary time. So they give credit to the sequences that are conserved, and then they penalize the ones that are different. So these are basically scoring matrices, and they're built on some very tricky sort of information, but I've tried to understand it and explain it in very simple terms. So the two major scoring matrices that are basically used, scoring matrix can be considered as a scheme, a testing scheme for if the proteins have a certain level of achievement or not. The two mostly used scoring systems are the BLOSSOM and PAM. And what these basically are based on, the basic concepts to understand these, it is the substitutional biases and the mutational saturation. So substitutional biases is it's based upon the concept of two concepts. So first of all, it is a codon degeneracy. So the concept that certain amino acids are coded with the same codons. For example, we have a codon and it encodes for the same amino acid. For example, over here, if we look at serine, that is the codon TCT, it codes for serine. TCC, it also codes for serine. So different codons code for the same amino acid. This is known as the codon degeneracy. And the second concept that we need to consider it is that certain um, amino acids, they have the same physicochemical properties. They basically may be hydrophobic or they may be polar. So despite a protein having different amino acids, but with the same physicochemical properties, they're going to have the same function. So based upon these two things, the codon degeneracy and the prospect of changing the amino acids with the same function, is basically what the substitution matrices are based on. The second thing to consider, it is the mutational saturation. And mutational saturation basically considers 2 points. It is the mutations per 100 residues and the differences per 100 residues. So considering an evolutionary period of time, what happens it is that the mutations per 100 residues and the differences must follow a linear pattern. It is what is assumed. But for over a very long evolutionary period of time, what happens it is that we do not know where exactly the mutational scoring scheme does, and over there we can consider it to enter into the twilight zone, where we are not basically sure what basically mutations or substitutions were there. So they also the substitution matrices are based upon this piece of information as well. And the substitution matrices basically, as I said earlier, they basically penalize poorly matched sequences and favor the matching identical sequences, and take into consideration the relative abundance of amino acids in protein. So some amino acids are really found in more abundance than others, so this also takes into consideration of that. So over here, as I told earlier, there were two scoring matrices. There were PAM and BLOSSOM. And what is this? This is basically all of the amino acids, the 20 amino acids aligned from end to end. In both of these cases, you can see over here. So what this does, it is basically compares the sequences. For example, in a more uh, version, and the alignment of these amino acids is considered. So for example, over here we see that the alignment of this, it gives a positive score, meaning that these residues, these amino acid residues, they occur more frequently, and hence they are scored positively. Whereas some amino acids, for example, you see A and C, they are given a negative score. It is because their association does not occur more prominently. So for amino acids, for example, which form disulfide bridges, their occurrence is important. It performs a more important or valid biological function. So their pairing, it is going to give a positive scheme, right? So this is basically the basic information about how this scoring scheme works. There is a lot of information in that, but the basic concept of this scoring scheme is that based on the probability that we are going to get a good a useful outcome of this scheme, it is they are scored either positively or negatively. And the most used schemes are the BLOSSOM and PAM 250, BLOSSOM 62 and the PAM 250. And how to choose between them, it is based upon the time divergence. So if we basically want a more time divergence, if we want to find out if based upon the evolutionary time, we can use the PAM 250 and the BLOSSOM 45, or alternatively we can go for the PAM 10 if we want to have information about the divergence over a less elaborated or a longer or a shorter evolutionary time. And the last but not the least, we are going to have a little bit of discussion about the local and global alignment. So basically, the global alignment contains the entire sequence of each protein or a DNA molecule. But the thing about global alignments is that it gives a lot of information, and not all of that information is really required. So for example, it's going to compare every single bit of DNA or protein a sequence that it is given, which is also important. Global alignment is important in certain contexts, but mostly used are the local alignments that focus on the greatest regions, on the regions that have the greatest similarity between the two sequences, which basically can give us a whole lot of sample of information from those conserved regions. So the logistics of the local and global alignment, we're going to be discussing them quite a lot. But first of all, we are going to focus on the local alignment in the basic local alignment search tool that I'll cover in the next section. So I hope everything that is discussed is right to my knowledge, and with the information regarding blast and how to perform it, I'm going to make another presentation. So thank you for your time, and Allah Hafiz.